Yes. Hello. Let's cut the music there. Hello, Ramley and other family. Oh, I gotta get this down. There we go. Hello, everybody. I'm Peyote. I'm your Canadians Rams fans. Thank you so much for tuning in. Whether you're watching live with me now or on the replay, I have a very special guest today. Oh, I'm so pumped for this interview. We do have Blaine from he has a couple of different titles, but you can find him in general on Turf Showtimes, and I know he's been involved with Downtown Rams. He's very active on Twitter. I highly recommend you give him a follow. The link to his Twitter profile is in the description below. Oh, sorry. That's a technical on my part there. All right. We're going to bring him onto the show here. If you have any questions in the chat, put them in. And we're going to talk to Blaine. Blaine, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Really looking forward to it. It's obviously been a very I don't want to call it an active offseason, but a dramatic offseason for the Rams to this point. So, really looking forward to jumping on and talking some Rams football.
Absolutely. I've kind of been explaining to my friends and like my social circle and stuff that being a Rams fan right now is like coming back from vacation. You spent all this money, and then now you're buying the cheap grocery store knockoff brands and just trying to kind of recover from vacation. But yeah, like let's start with that. What are your initial reactions to the decision that the Rams had to make of, do we kind of eat this dead cap this year and just focus on drafting and developing talent, or do we try and restructure contracts and go all in for one more year? What are your thoughts?
I guess I see both sides of it. I have mixed feelings about it. Jalen Ramsey is probably one of my favorite players on the team. So seeing him get traded for only a third round pick and depth tight end, really, I didn't really take well. I do see both sides of it, but like where I stand is the NFC is so wide open. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is it going to be the Packers again this year? So really, you have the Eagles, and I mean, you can throw Dallas in there, but they really haven't done anything since they last won a title in the 90s, and they're like the 49ers, in which they still live on those titles in the 90s. That's all they can talk about. There isn't much competition in the NFC. So like, why not just stick it out and keep and see what happens next year? And but at the same time, like, I can see trying to load up and maybe go all in for like one more shot in 2024. So I see both sides of it. I personally would have kept it together, but I guess that's also why I'm not the general manager of the Los Angeles Rams, I guess.
Yeah, totally. And like, I definitely go back and forth on it. And I kind of am of the mindset of, well, they made a decision. There's going to be consequences, good or bad, right? And we really won't know until the Rams are on the field next year, probably by week 5, if it really because, I've seen the extremes of like, oh, the Rams are going to be better than expected, or no, the Rams are going to be the worst team. They're tanking for Caleb Williams next year. And so, we live in this world of extremes, right? But really, we don't know, right? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah. No, sorry. Exactly. We don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, I think I'm kind of conflicted on the offensive line situation as well. But I mean, if those guys can stay healthy or relatively healthy, they obviously, I think it's really going to be really difficult to be less healthy than they were last year at that position. But if they can stay relatively healthy on the offensive line, I like probably 8 to 10 wins is still realistic. I think, taking for Caleb Williams, I don't think that's something the Rams would do, especially with Sean McVay as their head coach. And I also don't see them as the top seed in the NFC either at this point in time. But, I think this is going to be an interesting team next year, because I think for the first time since he really came to the Rams, McVay's going to kind of have a chip on his shoulder and something to prove. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing.
Oh, yeah. Good take. Speaking of good takes, I want to give a couple of shout outs here to people in the chat. We got Grandizer 12. Good to see you. We got Boy and his dad. Jared's in the house. We got GP Shadow. Good to see you. He's welcoming you into the show. And yeah, Blaine, so thankful you're here. And could you maybe just, for those of you who don't know, I knew Blaine as a writer first. I didn't realize that he was active on Twitter and he was involved with some other things around the Rams. But you've been writing for the Rams for a while now. I guess first off, can you say, how did you become a Rams fan, and what led you to cover the team? And because was it 2012 that you started covering them professionally?
Yeah. So I think I'm 29, so I think for most Rams fans about my age, it was the Greatest Show on Turf really caught my attention as a kid, and they were fun to watch. They just watching them win that Super Bowl against the Titans. Really, that's when I first started following them, and that's when they became my team, and stuck with them ever since. And then kind of as I got older, I kind of figured out kind of what I wanted to do, and I wanted to go to sports writing. And I got involved in my freshman year of college in 2012 with Ramblin' Fan and Fansided. So I was there for about 4 years or so, and then actually joined Rams Wire for a little bit, and that's when I met Jake Allen Bogan, and then he started Downtown Rams, and I teamed up with him, and kind of started that doing the podcast and writing, and then just about last year I started with Turf Show Times, and been with Turf Show Times last year, and that's kind of my story. And growing up around wasn't easy. They weren't good for quite a while there, but stuck with them, and here we are.
That's awesome. Well, Blaine, thank you for all your hard work providing good coverage of the Rams. And I knew you had been around to like different organizations, but now you've almost done like the trifecta of all the different ones. That's really interesting. Wow. I will give everyone in the chat, feel free to get your questions in. I'll mark them and we'll get to as many as we can here. But Blaine, we do have a question here from Craig. So thanks, Craig, for your question. He says, do you feel our record was a catalyst for the purge? We went 5-12 with a star-studded D and a D that kept us in, but didn't win games. That's a really good question, Craig. What do you think, Blaine?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think it's a fair question for sure. I think that is part of it. I think after you go 5-12, you kind of look at yourself in the mirror a little bit and think, what are the next steps here? And I think they kind of saw an opportunity to maybe head into a new era of Rams football, but to keep these pillars together, which are Aaron Donald, Matthew Stafford, and Cooper Kupp, and I would have argued Jalen Ramsey, but apparently he wasn't a part of the equation anymore. But yeah, I think they saw an opportunity to kind of start building a new era, and that's kind of why I think where you get the cap space next year and keeping that 2024 first round pick, and I think it was just kind of it allowed them to reflect a little bit, and that was probably a good thing after just the high they were on the year before.
And I think Craig does a good job here pointing out the Rams, watching the Rams for most of last year, you felt like the defense was hopefully going to keep them in it till the fourth quarter, and then you try and steal the game at the end, which isn't a sustainable model of winning in the NFL. And I think that very much could have been. That's a really great point. It could have been a catalyst of, okay, do we really want to have this star-studded defense that we're paying a lot of money to only go 5-12, right? Where if we're going to get younger and cheaper, we can still go 5-12. So I don't know. Interesting point there, Craig. A Grandizer here always comes in with great questions. And I just got to give a shout out, Exoc. So it's good to see you, man. Thanks for tuning on in. He's excited to see you here as well. But Grandizer asks, does he agree with Alaric Jackson's tweet about the offensive line being pretty much set already? Now, I'm sure you remember this, but for our viewers, towards the end of the season last year, Alaric Jackson had a very unusual tweet for an offensive lineman to tweet out in the NFL, but he essentially was just, it's like he was talking to fans directly. Like you felt like he was in the room talking with you about the Rams offensive line and how he thinks that they have the personnel to be a successful offensive line that they have. What are your thoughts on the tweet?
Yeah, so I think it kind of goes back to kind of what you and I were talking about earlier with two extremes. Like earlier you were talking, one extreme where like you think Rams are going to outperform expectations this year, and another extreme that's the Rams are going to take for Caleb Williams. And I think as far as like the fan base goes, you have one side of the fan base that expects the Rams to absolutely purge the offensive line and get five new starting pieces and use half their draft picks on offensive linemen, and then there's another half or another section where maybe they don't expect the Rams to do anything on the offensive line, which I think is kind of where Alaric Jackson's tweet was coming from. So I think it's gonna be somewhere in the middle. I don't know if it's completely set, but I do think they have pieces in place. I mean, Rob Hagenstein he was the only offensive lineman to play all 17 games last year. He's as solid as they get at right tackle.
Yeah.
He's extremely underrated, I think, just by the fan base in some aspects, and I think by the media, just extremely underrated player and just annually solid.
I agree. Yeah.
I think Coleman Shelton. I was really glad they brought him back. I think he's a good center guard player, kind of interchangeable at those spots. Alaric played really well last year at guard and tackle, but I think kind of outside of that, I think there are some question marks. I mean, Joe Noteboom, Brian Allen, they've played well when they've been healthy, but they just haven't been healthy that often. And I think when it comes to the offensive line, you kind of create your own luck. I mean, you can say the injuries last year were bad luck, but at the same time, those are two injury-prone players to begin with. They kind of created their luck by investing in those players. So I would expect them to bring in another piece, maybe two, to kind of add some depth. But I do think for the most part they have their guys.
Yeah, and so because I remember in the 2020 draft when they didn't draft any offensive linemen, and that was the Tutu Atwell pick instead of Creed Humphrey. The Ram fans still talk about to this day. I remember everyone kind of being shocked of like, oh, we're not drafting any offensive linemen. And we might have another draft like that where we only draft one or none, right? And on the Joseph Noteboom topic, I am of the mindset of I was really, really encouraged when he agreed to restructure his deal. And I know he knows last year didn't go well. Like you saw it in his body language when he was playing, and then it stinks that his season ended with injury. But I am of the mindset of players can get better. I know it's tough coming back from injury. It may not be a popular opinion among Ram fans, but I'm still optimistic that Noteboom can get back to a high level of play. I don't know if that's at the left tackle position. What do you think about moving Noteboom to the inside at like a guard spot?
I'm against it, I guess. They tried him there, I think, in 2019.
He's moved around the line a bunch of
times. And he really if you look at, I know PFF isn't the end all be all by any means, but if you compare his rates from when he's a left tackle and a left guard, he's much more efficient at tackle. Now how his movement is post Achilles, I think that's fair to take into account. So maybe he would be more efficient at guard at this point post injury, but preferably just based off of what we've seen in the past, I would prefer him at tackle and putting Alaric Jackson at left guard, having Shelton at center, and then we forget Rams drafted Logan Bruss last year in the third round. So I think the plan for him was at right guard. So maybe you can put him at right guard and then him at right tackle. So that would be my 5 offensive linemen if I had to choose right now. But they certainly have options for sure, just with how interchangeable position-wise these guys are.
Awesome. Yeah, no, appreciate your insight into that. I got to give a shout out for Rudy from the Vermillion Sports Report. Appreciate you coming on here. Grandizer's joking at us here. And anyone who's watched my channel, and I'm sure you've saw this, I've heard this Rams team is going through a rebuild, a retool, a remodel, like all these words. What do you call it that they're going through?
I think I understand the Rams front office, the Rams brass not using the word rebuild, because rebuild is just rebuild isn't going to sell tickets. So I understand about using that word, but if we're laying the facts right now, like it's a rebuild. Like they're tearing it down and they're they're going to try to build it back up. That's how I see it, and I guess we'll see how it goes. It's really going to depend on how they hit. I think this draft might be the most crucial draft since 2017 for this regime.
Absolutely. I have a bunch of questions that came in here. Everyone, thank you so much for them. I have marked them. We'll get to as many as we can. But Blaine, they're loving you here. Appreciate you being here. Let me go first and just give a shout out. Jack42, good to see you as always. AMS, also good to see you. Thanks for coming in. He said, in all caps, why did the Rams tell the league they were intending to trade their players in advance? And I think this is more of a criticism of, how they approach the Allen Robinson, announcement of like they're giving him permission to seek a trade and they're willing to pay part of his salary. Also, just like what they were doing with Jalen Ramsey, it kind of felt like, I know like a lot of Ram fans disagree with the doing right by the player mindset. I see both sides of that argument. But do you think the Rams maybe make a mistake at trading away their top tier talent?
I do, yeah. I think you can definitely question just the value that they've gotten back for these players. I mean, the Todd Gurley situation is complex, but the fact that they didn't get really anything for Todd Gurley is just mind blowing. They've invested in these guys who just haven't gotten a lot in return. And I think Jalen Ramsey is the latest example. Only getting a third round pick and depth tight end. They outright cut Leonard Floyd, and I mean Leonard Floyd hasn't signed with anybody yet, but edge rushers are hard to come by, and I think they should have at least been able to get a day 3 pick minimally.
Totally.
And then you cut Bobby Wagner, and he signs with the Seattle Seahawks yesterday. So honestly, like at least control where he goes a little bit. There were 28 other teams that would have been better to trade him to, or for him to sign with. I think it's fair to question. I think kind of how they handle these trades for sure.
And it's funny because I was literally the day before the Ramsey trade happened, I did a video of a mock draft because I do that for fun. And in that mock draft, I had a fake Jalen Ramsey trade. And I made sure like this is fake, there's not being reported on it or anything like that. And in the trade, I had the Rams trade him to the Lions for a first round pick and a third round pick. And in my mind, that was like, okay, you know what? They might get a little less than that. They might get more than that. But like, that's a pretty rational thing for Jalen Ramsey's skill set. And then when a third round pick, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Oh my.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just you. I think Peter King from NBC Sports had written in his Good Morning Football or whatever his daily or whatever his weekly column is, that he had proposed from Jalen Ramsey traded. He had first round picks, a second and third round picks, and they're like the Rams did not get good value for him. But I guess if their main purpose was, hey, we just want to get his cap number off the books, and I guess they accomplished what they set out to do.
Absolutely. Oh man, but I digress. The decision was made. We'll have to. It's gonna be so weird seeing Jalen Ramsey in a Dolphins uniform. I'm not gonna look
for sure.
I got a couple more questions. I appreciate everyone with these great questions coming in hot. So GP Shadow asked, how does this offseason feel compared to the breakup of the greatest show on turf? Whoa, that's a tough one. So I think GP Shadow, I think you're referring to like when Kurt Warner left, and now the breakup for the greatest show on turf was, Falk retired. We had Steven Jackson come in. Holt and Bruce went other places. Like it was kind of a slower pace to it for that breakup, where this feels more of a like rip the Band-Aid off sort of thing. But I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts on? Do you remember the greatest show on turf kind of breaking up?
Yeah, and I actually wrote an article about this a couple weeks ago, and I think it is very similar. That you have some things that kind of line up. And I think what it boils down to is, the Rams kind of are ripping off the Band-Aid right now, but like I said, I think it really comes down to this draft. You can't have this draft where you only come out with maybe 2 players. This has to be a draft that really turns the franchise around, and that's kind of, I think, how you get this remodel to work. It really comes down to this draft and finding a Cooper Kupp, finding a John Johnson at safety in the 4th round. Just like in 2017 when they found all these impact players. That's what the Rams have been missing in their draft classes. They found solid contributors, but they're missing those impact players. And so yeah, I think there's definitely comparisons to both. But yeah, the Rams I think. They didn't. I think the Red Shelter tried to hold on for too long. Whereas, yeah, this regime, they ripped off the Band-Aid, and we'll see. We'll see if they turn left or the Red Shelter kind of turn right.
That's a really good perspective. I've never thought of it that way until this exact moment. But yeah, like there was sort of this thing where the Great Show on turf kind of tried to hold on for too long. Oh man, interesting. That's a great question, GP Shadow. Craig says, last question for me. Are we strong contenders for OBJ? And I'll just start, Blaine, by saying this. I have got fed up with covering like the cryptic part of the OBJ. I love OBJ. I'd love him to be back on the Rams. I don't love the cryptic tweets and the will they or won't they of like that experience of OBJ that's been going on this past year, only for him not to sign with any team. So that's my own personal frustrations as a Rams content creator. But what about for someone like yourself? Has it been frustrating, or do you like it because it's easy clicks for you?
No, I also find it frustrating because you do have to cover it, but it's like, and then for him to not to sign anywhere, like you said, it was like, okay, this is frustrating. I'm just gonna stop doing this now. When he signs somewhere, he signs somewhere. But
yeah,
I mean, are there strong contenders? I mean, Les Snead said today at the league meetings in Arizona that they're interested, but I think he kind of has to say that as well. So if the money is right, they'll do it. But are the Rams in a spot right now to where they're even in a place just like team build wise to bring in an OBJ? We'll see.
Yeah, totally. LA Rams talk. Good to see you. He says, question for Blaine. Who do you think the Rams draft, and do you think we might trade up for a falling quarterback? Also, hey. We'll just point out, I did see the mock draft. I forget who put it up, where like there's a scenario where the Rams trade up to get like Will Levis or something. I don't personally see that happening. I could see us drafting a quarterback late in the draft. But what are your thoughts? Who do you think the Rams will draft?
So I guess at pick 36, my like ideal scenario would be for them to bring in Will McDonald from Iowa State, just extremely athletic edge rusher, kind of someone that they can maybe develop this year, because he is a little raw. So like if you can develop him this year in a kind of a this remodel year, whatever you want to call it, development year. Develop him, get him some snaps, and then next year's a pretty good free agent edge rusher class. So sign a premier edge rusher next, and you have this really solid duo of Will McDonald and free agent edge rusher to be named later. I think that's my ideal scenario there. But as far as trading up for a QB, I kind of was on this train earlier in the draft season when it was thought that maybe Anthony Richardson would drop down into the 20s or past 25, but it kind of seems like he's going to be going in the top 10 now. I would not trade up for Will Levis. At this point, I think they're better off maybe holding off and maybe drafting a Shepherd later on in the draft, or Aiden O'Connell, or the kid from Fresno State, Jake Hayner from Fresno State would be a good option as well. There's actually a lot of I think decent backup quarterback depth there, kind of at the end of the draft. So just kind of where this team is right now. I don't think I'd use capital to take a QB that may or may not hit.
Totally, and it's funny you mentioned Aiden O'Connell. I feel like this is like over exaggerated, but I feel like probably 70% of the mock drafts that I read from Ram fans or people that kind of cover the Rams have Aiden O'Connell drafted by the Rams at some point in it. So, and I wouldn't be mad at it if it's later in the draft for sure. Appreciate everyone coming in with these great questions. Apologies if I do miss some, but we'll try to get to as many as we can here. He said, if you were Snead, how would you have handled this Rams free agency? The same or differently? And you already kind of touched on this, but yeah, I'm curious. Could you expand a bit more on? Is there anything that you've liked that Snead has done this year?
I did like that they brought back Coleman Shelton. That was an important move, obviously. But I did put together a mock offseason right before the beginning of free agency, and I had restructured Jalen Ramsey's contract to open up $10 million. I had gone the restructure route to compete this year, so I brought in I would have brought in Nate Herbig, who signed with. I think he signed with the Steelers. He was offensive lineman for the Eagles, I think 2 years ago, and was with the Jets last year. But I think he would have been a really good solid guard option, cheap. I really liked Isaiah Oliver at cornerback. He was a free agent this year, and of course he signs with the San Francisco 49ers. Just very, very typical there. So I think there were some cheap options out there. Andre Dillard was an option at tackle that I thought would have been good. I would not have restructured Noteboom just with his injury history. I probably would have tried to trade him or cut him, honestly. There's some different routes that I would have gone, but I like as far as just like cheap free agents, Nate Herbig and Isaiah Oliver were two of my favorite guys that I would have loved to see the Rams bring in, but unfortunately, one of them is now on our division rivals team.
Yeah, I'll also just toss in there. I'm still watching, and I know it's my fandom in me talking, but any thoughts on John Johnson making a return to the Rams?
That'd be awesome. That'd be awesome if he came back. I personally think if he comes to Los Angeles, I kind of see his fit with the Chargers. Honestly, I think he'd be a great fit there. A return with Staley. I think it was Adderley that just retired, so he could take Adderley's spot in that secondary. But honestly, like a return to Rams would be awesome. I loved when they drafted him in 2017, so I'm all open to return. But I think his fit with the Chargers is a little better at this point.
No, that's a fair take. A couple of questions here from Rudy saying, Blaine, considering the Rams are still the only NFC West team that has a Super Bowl winning quarterback, do you expect the offense to be a force next season with LaFleur if the O-line is healthy? Yeah, I feel like in the midst of all the Rams headlines that have gotten Ram fans riled up, we've almost forgotten that we have a new offensive coordinator this year in Mike LaFleur. What are your thoughts on the hire, and do you think this was the right move for the Rams?
Yeah, I love the hire. Just his familiarity, I think, with McVay. McVay is obviously I think really close with the LaFleur family. Obviously had Matt LaFleur as his offensive coordinator a while back. I think it's a really good fit. And I do see improvements. I mean, this was a team they obviously were lacking the explosives last year on offense, and it was also just completely it was just a chaotic environment as well on the offensive side of the ball. You had the offensive line shuffling ever since week one, Stafford getting hurt, Kupp got hurt. Just a lot of moving pieces. I would like to see them bring in another wide receiver at some point, whether it's a draft or even a cheap player in free agency if they can. But they are missing, I think. If you look towards the end of their run in 2021, Odell Beckham Jr. just completely changed how the offense was working. Having that second option outside Kupp was a total game changer, and I think they really missed that last year. So I think they need a second wide receiver, but I am excited for what this offense can do because the potential is there, but I think a lot of things have to go right as well.
Okay, no, that's fair. That's fair. And oh man, just talking about Odell and Kupp again makes me remember we never really got to see the Woods, Kupp, and Odell offense. That trio of wide receivers. That what Ram fans were salivating over. Another great question here, Aaron Kelly. Good to see you. Thanks for tuning on in. He's saying, Speaking of wide receivers, will Allen Robinson still be a good fit for us? Now, I've had a lot of conversations about Allen Robinson. I've had try and trade him, before the draft. Okay, there's pros to that. Then if your goal is saving money, try and save him post June 1st because you're going to save more cap space doing that. And I do know that, especially next year, there is significant savings if the Rams do trade Allen Robinson. However, in the scenario that they really can't cut him from what I've seen, and from what I've seen on the cap, cutting him doesn't have a lot of benefits to it for this year or next year. So in that case, the Rams keep Robinson. Do you see a scenario where he comes back from injury, Stafford has a fully healthy offseason, they can build chemistry, and Allen Robinson becomes that number 2 wide receiver that we're hoping that he becomes, or that he was going to be? What are your thoughts?
I think it's definitely interesting, and there are a few things to I think kind of touch on. Is I mean, everyone wants to talk about the offensive line, right? But but for whatever reason, the offensive line didn't affect how Allen Robinson was producing. Obviously, Cooper Kupp is going to be the number 1 read on most plays. You want to get Cooper Kupp the ball as much as possible. He's your best playmaker. But but without protection, you can't get to your second read. And most of the times, Allen Robinson was likely the second read, and there just wasn't time for Stafford to get to a second read. People are saying, Allen Robinson wasn't getting open and all that, but the film would disagree. The stats would disagree. I think he had the 28th best open score last year, so he was getting open, but he just wasn't getting the ball. And I think part of that just had to do with the offensive line, just not protecting Stafford and allowing Stafford to get to Robinson in his progressions. And then I think you touched on it as well. McVay kind of touched on it, I think, today at the league meetings, where he said, Stafford's elbow injury was a bigger deal than I think it was made than the team made it out to be, and they didn't anticipate it to be as bad as it was, and it turned out to be a bigger issue than they thought. So them not being able to get that offseason chemistry, I think, did have an effect on the season, at least early on. So I think if he comes back, which I think is a pretty big if still, I do see a scenario in which that he has a nice bounce back, because all throughout training camp, I mean, the media was thriving about Allen Robinson. They were moving him around and just they were talking. Allen Robinson's going to be in for a big year. He's making all these flashy plays in training camp, et cetera, et cetera.
Touchdown machine.
So I do think there is a scenario in which Allen Robinson comes back and has a decent year, but I think it is a big. I think you kind of have to sell him on coming back again, because I don't think he had a good experience last year. So I think you need to sell him on coming back and get him sold on the vision again.
Definitely. We do have a few other questions here, but I want to be respectful of your time. And Blaine, this has been so awesome. This is great. I have one more question to ask you before I do any more viewer questions here. I'll admit this is a personal question. I always love to ask Rams reporters is, what's it like covering this team? Because it is such a unique team. If you compare the Rams to covering other NFL teams, you get these weird headlines, you get these trades that happen, you get kind of these weird falling outs with Cam Akers or Todd Gurley or Brandon Cooks. For as a staff writer at Turf Showtimes, what is it like to cover this team?
It's not boring, that's for sure. It's one of those things where you have to be ready all the time for this team to either to make a move, because the moves usually come at 10 o'clock at night, or right when you're getting ready for bed or something. They're trading for Matthew Stafford. I remember when the Stafford trade was happening. I was on a stream with Jake at the time.
Yeah, I remember you on that stream. Yeah.
And we were talking about the Senior Bowl, and then all of a sudden the Rams have traded for Matthew Stafford, and it's just wow, this came out of absolutely nowhere. So you definitely have to be ready, because they're not a team that shies away from making the big move. at any given moment.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Do you have time for a couple more questions?
Yeah. You can
Awesome.
Yeah, let's go.
Awesome. Jake, our resident Bills fan, but great supporter of the channel. He says, if Jalen Carter falls somehow to 36, do you take him?
That's a loaded question.
That is a very loaded question.
Yeah, I think if his I think it depends on his legal situation. I think that's first and foremost. But like, if he does somehow fall to 36, and the first and teams in the first round are scared of him, but if the Rams have done their research and they feel confident, then yeah, I think you take him. He's a top 5 talent in this draft, and I think that's yeah. I think you take that kind of risk there if you've done your research and feel confident on his situation.
And I think you nailed it right there. Like, in general, I'm more cautious about legal stuff and off the field stuff.
Yeah.
But in your scouting's research, if you're able to talk to his lawyers, you're able to talk to who's giving him legal advice, things like that, get kind of a greater grasp of the situation, then that's maybe gives you the confidence to be like, hey, if we're getting a top 5 talent at 36, let's take that risk, right? Mm-hmm. Speaking of that draft here, Grandizer loves the draft. He loves draft talk here. Do you have this kind of put you on the spot, but do you have like a top 5 college prospects that you would like to see the Rams draft?
Yeah. So
I know you had a great article about corners today.
Yeah. So Will McDonald's my number 1. I absolutely love Will McDonald. He's one of my favorite players in this draft. I really hope he's in the Horns next year. So he'd be number 1 for me. I don't think he'll fall, but Deonte Banks, the cornerback from Maryland, I really don't think he's gonna fall out of the first round. But if he does, he's kind of one of my pipe dreams. So I really hope he's there at 36. But if he's not, I also really like his teammate Jacorian Bennett. Great fit with the Rams. Speedy corner. Led Power 5 cornerbacks and pass breakups last season. Had a really good Senior Bowl. I love Jacorian Bennett. And then on the offensive line, I live in Syracuse. I live in the Syracuse area, so I absolutely love the left tackle from Syracuse, Matthew Bergeron. If Bergeron is there in the 3rd round, I absolutely pounce on him. Can play guard and tackle. I think he provides some good insurance for Joe Noteboom. Let's see what else. What other position do I want to hit here? Defensive line. I fell in love with Nesta J. Silvera at the Senior Bowl. Overpowered. I swear the guy owned real estate in backfield because he was just constantly there. Would be a really great gains replacement, I think. And then let's hit another one. And then just another pipe dream, Jalen Hyatt from Tennessee, the wide receiver. If he falls to the 2nd round, he's got comps to Deshaun Jackson, Speedy. The Rams offense lacked explosive plays last year, and I think he's just an immediate playmaker that they can have a lot of fun with. And if you're going to try to outscore teams 38-35 on a week-to-week basis, having a wide receiver of his caliber would be huge. And I have seen some mock drafts with him falling out of the 1st round. So if Hyatt's there at 36, I'd absolutely love for Rams to take him.
Awesome. I gotta add one little. Have you heard of anyone who's watched my channel? Is I target this player in every mock draft. Have you heard out of Louisville? Yeah, Diaba.
Yeah. I do like him. He's I'll be diving into edge rush or something. I think tomorrow as far as fits for the Rams. But I do love Yaya Diaby. He's a fun player.
Totally. And I'm not a draft expert by any means, but I get excited for names. I like if he were to sack a quarterback or something, going yeah, I don't know, get the crowd at SoFi going.
For sure.
A few more questions here is we haven't talked about him yet. Rudy asks, will Tutu Atwell emerge this year? And it's frustrating because I am of the mindset of you really can't call someone a bust. You can't until after 3 seasons at least. This is year 3 for Tutu. And by all intents and purposes, Ben Skoranek, as a 7th round pick of the same year, has kind of developed more of a role in this offense than Tutu has. We saw some flashes last year, but what are your thoughts on Tutu Atwell at this point in his career?
I'd say where were you last year when he emerged? And I'm just playing there, but yeah, no, I'm so excited for Tutu, and I think you do bring up a good point with Toronto kind of overtaking him. But I think one thing to keep in mind, I think, is where there was an open path for Skronik. They played they play the same position, but they play two very different positions.
Yeah. Different skill sets because of different body types, different. Yeah, no.
Exactly. So whereas Skronik was able to come in and be this blocker, be this big slot type player, the Rays have had Brandon Powell, and Brandon Powell was a good player. He earned his field time, like he should have been on the field. But kind of that gimmicky gadget stuff that Brandon Powell is doing, that's redundant when it comes to when Tutu Atwell also does that. So I mean, you can put him on to stretch the field, but you can only put him on to run in a straight line to throw a deep ball every once in a while. So I am looking forward to him kind of hopefully getting more involved in the offense this year and in more of those gadget plays. I think McVay kind of regretted not using him more towards it, especially after he came on at the end of last year, because just of the flashes that we have seen of him, I do think there is a player there. The talent is there. I think they just need to get him involved and get him the ball in space. So yeah, I'm excited for him, and like you said, it is a big year for him. It's year 3. It's now or never for him.
Definitely. Another interesting question here, and I feel like this is the low key Rams news of the day here. Is how do you both feel about Marquise Copeland coming? I think re-signing back with the Rams. So they signed him to a 1-year deal. I'm of the mindset of I didn't feel this was an absolute need, like, oh, get Copeland back. But I don't, I'm not like if we would have gotten like Taylor Rapp back, I'd be like, oh great, like Taylor Rapp's back. But with Copeland, I'm excited about it. I'm sort of indifferent to that point. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm kind of indifferent about it as well. I think he's a guy that they did need to bring back, just because they're going to need depth on the defensive line, and he's a guy that's been in the building the last couple of years, has shown flashes, experience, and I mean you're losing A'Shaun Robinson, you lost Great Gaines, so you're going to need bodies there, and he's an experienced body, and can hopefully take that next step in a full-time role next year.
Yeah, and he's on a one-year prove-it deal, and I don't know. I love a narrative of a player on a 1-year prove-it contract that they're trying to stay in the NFL, earn their spot. Love it. Show that grit. Rudy asked, he said, ETA, so estimated time arrival for statues being built in front of SoFi Stadium. Do you think Donald, Cup, and Stafford get bronze statues out there?
Let's ETA for stats. Let's see. So let's say Aaron Donald plays through 2024 and then he retires after the 2024 season. I'll say statue by the year 2030, maybe. Okay. For Aaron Donald. I mean, he's the GOAT, right? So yeah, I'd say let's get a 99 statue out there and Chargers fans can take photos in front of Aaron Donald.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, everyone, we are going to end the live stream there. But Blaine, thank you so much for coming on. You've been awesome. Yeah. You've been amazing. Do you have any words for our viewers of I know they can find you on Twitter. The link to your Twitter page is in the description below. But yeah, any last words for our viewers?
Just thanks for having me again. I had a blast, and thanks for the great questions. I had a great time. So thanks for having me on. And you can follow me on Twitter at bgresakdtr, and then you can read my stuff on turfshowtimes.com.
Awesome. All right. Blaine, stick around. We'll chat just a little bit afterwards. And everyone watching, thank you for tuning in live or on the replay. You guys are awesome. And as always, go Rams, horns up, and peace out. Let's go Rams.